17th century did the first cracks begin to appear in this vast Gothic structure, upon which more concerted labour and gargoylean ingenuity had been lavished than on any work of man before or since. Then, in 1637, Descartes published his Discourse on Method. In this he questioned all the previously accepted certainties of the world, arriving at one bedrock notion upon which all thought could be based. This was his famous dictum, Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Modern philosophy had begun, and the cobwebs of Aristotle and Thomism were swept away forever. From Aquinas' writings. Aquinas' famous prime mover proof of the existence of God. Anything that is in nature must be moved by something else. Likewise, this something else, in so far as it too is in motion, must also be moved by something else. Similarly, that too must be moved by yet another thing. But this chain of events cannot recede forever, for if it did, there could be no first mover, and thus no other mover. For second movers cannot move unless they are moved by a first mover, in the same way that a stick does not move anything unless it is moved by a hand. In this way we must reach a prime mover which is not itself moved by anything, and all understand that this is God. Summa Theologica. The basis of Aquinas' refutation of the ontological argument. We can never know what God is, only what he is not. Therefore we must reflect upon the ways in which he is not, rather than the ways in which he is. Summa Theologica. An example of where Aquinas' reliance on Aristotle is so admirable in principle, but less practical in application. As Aristotle shows, we should proceed as follows when studying a particular class of things. First, we should attempt to discover the qualities which all members of this class hold in common. Only then should we study the special qualities of the differing individuals within it. There is a class of things which includes all living creatures, so the best way to study the members of this class is first to discover what qualities they have in common, and only later what special qualities are possessed by different members. There is one thing common to every living thing. This is the soul, for all living creatures possess a soul. Therefore, to discover knowledge about living creatures, the best way to proceed is first to study the soul, which is present in each one of them. Commentary on Aristotle's De Anima, concerning the soul. But this approach is not quite so laughably outmoded as it might appear. The quality that set living things apart was the soul. Subsequent quantitative investigations have been unable to locate this elusive entity. But there remains no doubt that this concept reflected some element of our experience. Science thus retreated to the more empirically safe notion of consciousness. Yet this too has now come under increasing fire. What precisely is consciousness? The quantitative approach finds extreme difficulty with such problems, which nonetheless remain fundamental to our notion of our existence. Perhaps such problems will be resolved only when we reincorporate the qualitative approach adopted by Aristotle, Aquinas, and medieval philosophy. Dante's Divine Comedy encapsulates the entire range of the medieval world and its thought. It provides us with an example of the relative esteem in which St. Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle were held. The ancient Greek philosopher is referred to as il maestro di coloro che sanno, the master of those who know. Later, Aquinas is referred to as fiamma benedetta, the flame of holy wisdom. Aristotle was the wisest of men, but only the word of Aquinas was regarded as having divine inspiration. The purpose of each thing is that which is intended by the creator or mover of that thing. Now the prime mover or creator of the universe is spirit or mind. Here Aquinas co-opts an Aristotelian notion of God as mind or intellect. For this reason, the final end or purpose of the universe must be the good of the intellect, and this is truth. Thus, truth must be the final purpose of the universe, and the pondering of truth must be the chief occupation of wisdom. Summa Contra Gentiles, the activity of the wise. Chronology of significant philosophical dates. 6th century BC. The beginning of Western philosophy with Thales of Miletus. End of 6th century BC, death of Pythagoras. 399 BC, Socrates sentenced to death in Athens. Circa 387 BC, Plato founds the Academy in Athens, the first university. 335 BC, Aristotle founds the Lyceum in Athens, a rival school to the Academy. 324 AD, Emperor Constantine moves capital of Roman Empire to Byzantium. 400 AD, St. Augustine writes his Confessions, philosophy absorbed into Christian theology. 410 AD, sack of Rome by Visigoths heralds opening of Dark Ages. 529 AD, closure of Academy in Athens by Emperor Justinian marks end of Hellenic thought. Mid-13th century, Thomas Aquinas writes his commentaries on Aristotle, era of scholasticism. 1453, fall of Byzantium to Turks, end of Byzantine Empire. 1492, Columbus reaches America, Renaissance in Florence and revival of interest in Greek learning. 1543, Copernicus publishes On the Revolution of the Celestial Orbs, proving mathematically that the Earth revolves around the Sun. 1633, Galileo forced by Church to recant heliocentric theory of the universe. 1641, Descartes publishes his Meditations, the start of modern philosophy. 1677, death of Spinoza allows publication of his Ethics. 1687, Newton publishes Principia, introducing concept of gravity. 1689, Locke publishes Essay Concerning Human Understanding, start of empiricism. 1710, Berkeley publishes Principles of Human Knowledge, advancing empiricism to new extremes. 1716, death of Leibniz. 1739 to 1740, Hume publishes Treatise of Human Nature, taking empiricism to its logical limits. 1781, Kant, awakened from his dogmatic slumbers by Hume, publishes Critique of Pure Reason. Great era of German metaphysics begins. 1807, Hegel publishes The Phenomenology of Mind, high point of German metaphysics. 1818, Schopenhauer publishes The World as Will and Representation, introducing Indian philosophy into German metaphysics. 1889, Nietzsche, having declared God is dead, succumbs to madness in Turin. 1921, Wittgenstein publishes Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, claiming the final solution to the problems of philosophy. 1920s, Vienna Circle propounds logical positivism. 1927, Heidegger publishes Being and Time, heralding split between analytical and continental philosophy. 1943, Sartre publishes Being and Nothingness, advancing Heidegger's thought and instigating existentialism. 1953, posthumous publication of Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations, high era of linguistic analysis. Chronology of Aquinas' life. 1225, birth of Thomas d'Aquino at Roccasecca in southern Italy. 1239, Aquinas begins studies at University of Naples. 1244, Aquinas enters Dominican order of mendicant friars, later abducted by his brothers on the road to Rome. 1244 to 1245, Aquinas imprisoned by mother at Roccasecca Castle. 1245, Aquinas escapes and journeys to Paris on foot. 1248 to 1252, Aquinas studies with Albertus Magnus in Cologne. 1251, Aquinas ordained in Cologne. 1252 to 1259, Aquinas teaching in Paris and writing Summa Contra Gentiles. 1259, Aquinas appointed advisor to Curia of Pope Alexander IV, leaves Paris for Italy. 1266, Aquinas begins Summa Theologica. 1268, Aquinas dispatched to Paris to deal with continuing conflict between University and Dominicans and radicalism of Averroists. 1272, Aquinas returns to Italy. 1273, Aquinas has mystical experience and ceases writing. 1274. Aquinas, summoned by Pope Gregory X to attend Second Council of Lyon, falls ill and dies on journey north. 1323. Aquinas canonized by Pope John XXII. 1879. Pope Leo XIII declares the works of St. Thomas Aquinas to be the only true philosophy. This concludes the reading of Thomas Aquinas in 90 minutes.